let's start here. We are a week removed. I know we touched on it last week, but we are a week removed, or so, maybe more, from the Ryan Ramczyk extension, an obvious extension. And the question is, now that it's all said and done, Kai Harley's worked his magic once again. Do we know where the Saints rank in the NFL in terms of cap space?
I think they're 15th right now in available cap space, which is absolutely crazy considering they were 111 million over or whatever it was. So look, I mean, they got to this point, and it just kind of happened a little bit backwards from how we talked about it. I think a lot of us thought that they'd do something with Marshawn Lattimore, Ramczyk, and Marcus Williams contracts early on in the process to clear out the cap space. They kind of put that on its head and did those things at the end. And in hindsight, I think that makes a lot of sense because they were able to negotiate on a level where things were a little bit more evened out. And they got Ramczyk as the 5th highest paid tackle in the NFL. And I think if they had done that deal earlier when there's this $100 million burden sitting on top of those negotiations, I think he's probably closer to 1 or 2, regardless of side, left or right, because they have that leverage and they can force you into it and say, hey, look, you want to keep these people, you don't want to cut this guy, you got to make this move. And, you get him to cave a little bit. You take that leverage out of the equation, and I think he ended up where he should be, the highest paid right tackle by more than $1 million. I think one of the more interesting things when you look at his contract is that he does have a provision in there that would escalate his salary by $1 million per season if he were ever named All-Pro, Associated Press All-Pro at left tackle. And it specifically says it has to be labeled left tackle, not offensive tackle, not right tackle, left tackle. And if he were to ever do that, he'd get $1 million bonus on his salary each remaining year on the contract. And obviously that's interesting because they still have Terron Armstead on the team, but he is in the last year of his deal. And it's a little bit interesting that's in there because at least one side of those negotiations is thinking it's possible that one day he could end up on that side of the line. And if he does, he has a way to earn back a little bit of that money. But that was the one thing in that deal that kind of popped out a little bit.
Yeah, that does pop out. And on New Orleans South football, the headline reads what Ryan Ramczyk's extension means for him, Saints, and Terron Armstead. So that's a bit of what is the value of Terron Armstead right now? Obviously, when healthy, he is an elite top 5, maybe definitely top 10 left tackle. Him and Ramczyk, I think, when healthy, are the best combination of tackles probably in the entire NFL. But the if healthy thing is kind of a big asterisk with Armstead thus far. I'm trying to remember last year what do you think the value of Terron Armstead is to the New Orleans Saints?
It's tough because, like you said, I think he is one of the best in the league. I thought last year was one of the best seasons he's had. And if he continues to get smarter and just learn more about the position, I think he continues to get even better. Early on, there was a lot of freakish stuff, but his technique in that is second to none. And there's a reason that he's elevated to a position where when they have these offensive line summits, he's almost a de facto speaker at these things, teaching guys how to do different things because his technique is so sound. And, we saw some of that stuff last year, which is some of the crazy highlights. And it wasn't just freak stuff. It was, he's gaining leverage and pushing a guy off the field out of bounds. But his value is a little bit difficult to quantify because you mentioned those injuries. I do think the last couple of years he's gotten ahead of them a little bit, and he's kind of figured out how to manage his body a little bit better. But there is a lot of wear and tear, and I think it would be fair to say for a 30-year-old guy, his body's maybe a little older than your average 30-year-old guy that hasn't been through all those injuries. But you don't see a lot of that in his play, and I think where it gets difficult with him is if he goes, they'll have $13 million in dead money, and because the way they set up their contracts, they void out and they kick the can with him literally like every single year to the point where there's this huge amount of money sitting there now. And if he were to leave, that prorates over X amount of years. They have 3 voidable years on there, so if he leaves, it all comes up and will go on next year's cap. If they get ahead of that and they agree to an extension and they can put actual money into place and undo those voids, you wouldn't have that $13 million hit. So if he still seems like he's playing well, it's a safer investment. I think there would be some logic in just keeping him around so that you don't take that hit just to watch him go play somewhere else and be excellent. But, it is a difficult signing. And if you're Terron Armstead and you see Ryan Ramczyk become the highest paid right tackle, I'm calling my agent and saying, hey, guess what? They made him the highest paid right tackle. I'm the best left tackle in the league. I want to be the number 1 paid left tackle. Yeah. I played for $13 million the last 3, 4, 5 years, I significantly outplayed that contract. I want to get paid now. I think he would be justified to do that. He's helped them out every year with the restructures. I think it could be a tough negotiation for them. And I think he is right there at the top of the league. It's just, how do you weigh those injuries and how does that factor into the risk assessment of doing that contract?
I didn't even consider this before we started this interview today. Certainly conundrum for the Saints front office to figure out. That will go into the future. Talking to Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill. Again, sign up for New Orleans football. I'm just going to keep it O-line centric for now, because one of the other big questions I've been thinking about a lot, and it's hard to judge because we don't have a lot of on-the-field work to draw from. Well, I guess none, quite frankly. But Cesar Ruiz going into year 2 of his career. Obviously, last year, the COVID year, weird offseason. He was a center, made a play guard. Any updates on how he is adjusting to guard going into year 2?
I do hear that he's picking up things quicker and that he seems a little bit more confident in the things he's doing, the questions he's asking in the meeting rooms, which are all very good signs. I think last year there was a lot of head spinning going on with him, and I don't think he probably really ever settled in to that spot. And it is a big jump. You're doing things a lot differently. Guys are rushing you differently than you'll see at center, and I think there's just a lot of adjustment there. And he's going to have to make it. I mean, last year they went back and forth. They played him, then they would play Nick Easton, and I don't think that you can go through another season like that if he's not doing the things he's supposed to be doing. I don't think they're going to care that he's a first-round pick. It's sink or swim time in some regard. At least in making some headway, and he's going to have to do that. I think the door's still open slightly if there's significant struggles early in camp, to where they could move him to center and put McCoy at guard. I know they don't want to do that, but I do think if things look bleak early, I think they would possibly try to do that. And then if that doesn't work, where do you go from there? I'm not at the point where I think he's actually going to bust or anything. I do think he's going to get better. Last year was hard for him, and all the circumstances. Missed 20 days of practice during camp. He's changing positions. It's the COVID offseason. He's not getting FaceTime with his coaches, or he's not in the meeting rooms, and you're putting a guy on Zoom calls with people he's never met for the whole offseason. I'm sure there's a lot of apprehension about speaking up and knowing where you fit in and how do I ask these questions. So I think just getting a little bit more normalized is really going to help that progression a lot for him. And like I said, I hear that some of those things are happening with him. We won't actually know. I don't think anybody will actually know until he's in pads in camp and he actually has to block somebody. But at least he knows what he's doing with his feet and how to set himself, and just a lot of different things that he was trying to pick up last year starting to become a little bit more natural for him. And, hopefully that pays off for them, because they need that interior to be really good. I mean, you got Jameis Winston or Payton back there. One guy has, trouble making decisions quickly. The other guy has trouble making, proper decisions. If they're getting sped up with interior rush, it's all going to fall apart. It isn't Drew Brees anymore, so they got to be better on that interior.
Well, I mean, and to your point, like when Drew Brees looked human in his Saints career, it was because of the interior rush. So, like, if he can get to them, he can definitely get to these guys. Last one here with Nick Underhill. This is bad rate on my part because I meant to play y'all the Janoris Jenkins sound at 9:15. I forgot. But Janoris Jenkins was on Raw Room, a podcast actually hosted by Jalen Collins, former LSU player. But he was talking about the New Orleans Saints and just what an elite organization was, or what elite organization they are, and how they handle things, how they treat their players. Did you get to hear it, Nick? And kind of what was your reaction to it?
I did. There were two things. My first reaction was a lot of the stuff he was saying, I was surprised that a lot of teams don't do these things. Just basically, hey, a walkthrough is actually a walkthrough, or a meeting starts at 9:30, so if you get there at 9:29, you're okay. Just treating people like adults and not making things unnecessarily difficult and stupid and hard to interpret. It seems like that's a good way to run a business, whether it's a sports team or, a Fortune 500 place. And the fact that the other places he played weren't like that, it doesn't surprise you that some organizations struggle and players don't want to be there. But, the other thing of this, too, is that I think that Sean Payton has just done a really good job, and we've mentioned this other times, just in the different things they do, the atmosphere after games, bringing in mascots to hype players up there in the league, just doing different things that make players want to be in the building, treating them well. The cooling semi they have at training camp, just to make sure the guys aren't overheating and they get a minute of respite. Just doing little things that make them want to be in the building, that make them want to be part of the organization. The biggest example most recently being, hey, all the players are complaining about practicing during the off season. They don't like mini camp. They don't like OTAs. They don't want to do it. So instead of fighting that, Payton just dialed it back and found a different way to go about it. And I think all these things, wanting players to be in your program, that's going to help with recruiting free agents and keeping guys around and also winning games. So
yeah.
I think just building that atmosphere is really important, and they've done a really good job of that. But it is surprising that some of the stuff that seems really basic just doesn't happen. And you know, there's guys on a podcast talking about a 9:30 meeting actually being 9:30 is some type of revelation is crazy to me. But
there's a lot of Nick. There's a lot of football hardos out there, right? That are just like from the old school where on time is late and we got to practice for 3 hours. We got to get this thing right. I mean, I've just seen it so many times. So yeah, it shouldn't be the different from the norm, but yeah, it sounds like it is. So who knows? It's crazy.
Hey, if you want me somewhere at 9:30, say 9:30. Don't, you know, if you want me there at 9:15, say 9:15.
Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill. New Orleans on Football is a site. Nick, thank you so much, man. Football season fast approaching. We can't wait. I know you can as well. Site's only getting stronger from here. Nick Underhill, thanks, man.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, when we get back, Ask the Bench, brought to you by Cold Curves Light. Keep the lock right here.